Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about distributions of data, but also at the same time, we're going to talk about a specific kind of graph called a histogram. So, a histogram, we're going to start off with that piece first because we haven't really worked with histograms since all the way back in Algebra 1. And a histogram, if you scroll down kind of towards the middle of the page, a histogram looks very similar to this. It looks like kind of like a bar graph. And usually there's going to be kind of tick marks on the side that correspond to however many items are in each of those specific spots. Now, with the histogram, how a histogram works is it kind of orders all of the data and it places each of the data points into a specific bin. So that's what each one of these bars represents. So in this first bin, whatever the values were between, we would in that first bin, let's say it was between, just for example, between 5 and 10. In that first bin, because it only goes up one tick, there was only one data point in that set that fell between 5 and 10. And each bin that shows up here, they're all going to be the same size. So if I'm between 5 and 10, that means my next bin is between 10 and 15. And it goes all the way from the lowest number up until that highest number. So if you do have a data point that has a 15, that would fall in this next bin because it goes from the lowest up. That depends on the teacher, depends on the scenario. You could reverse that, but that's how we're going to really work our histograms in this unit. So based on what your bins are, you can tell by the graph how many data points fell in that bin. So in this first one, there was only one. In my second one, because I go up 2, that means we're going to be at 2 items in that bin. Looks like there's 3 in this one, 5 in this one, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's only 4, sorry. 4 in this one, 5 in the next one, 6 in the next one, and we're back down to 1 in the last one. So if we total those up, that's how many data points would be in this set. Now, when it comes to histograms, though, histograms we're not going to be doing by hand. We're going to do all on the calculator. So down below here, it says Mrs. Schroeder's students each gave a presentation as part of their class project. The length of each presentation is shown in the table. Create a histogram. So we are going to follow these calculator steps and we're going to go through and we're going to create our histogram on the calculator. Now, as a rule of thumb, when it comes to the number of bins, we always usually want between 4 and 6 bins. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're creating our data set and we're creating our histogram, is that you're looking to have between 4 and 6. Now, this is where we're going to go to our handy dandy trusty calculator. So if we pull up our calculator, you guys can have those directions kind of on the side, but you can kind of see what our first step is going to be. And it says we're going to go into the stat menu. So stat is kind of depending on the calculator that you're using. Mine is actually, this is not a true TI-84, but it has all of the buttons that we're going to be going into. And the first one we're going to hit is the stat button. So if you follow those directions, stat is right below the delete button. It's kind of 2 below the zoom button. But we're going to hit stat and we're going to go into the edit menu. I'm going to hit enter to get in there. Now, if you have other data points in there, if you highlight the list arrow up till the list is highlighted and click clear, that didn't work. Stat edit, either way, you can go through and delete out each of the individual values. That's probably the quickest way. But either way, we want to type in the numbers in our set. So I'm going to pause right now and I'm going to enter in all of the pieces that are in my set. Now, before I do so, keep in mind that to get your data points in there, you do have to click the down arrow in order to actually enter it into the list. So if I hit the number, if I type 17 into that first list and click enter, that will make the data point kind of stick in that list. You could also just hit the next one, which is 13, and just arrow down to the next one. That also works. But either way, pause your video now and type in all of those data points. Now, once you have everything typed in, now we can move on and we can look at step 2, which tells us we have to turn the stat plot on. So all we have to do is press the second key and then go and press the Y equals key, and that will take you to the stat plot. So if I go second Y equals, you won't see the exact same menu that I see, but you'll see something similar. Now, if you have the off button as highlighted, remember you do want to highlight, put your highlighted cursor on the on and click enter. We want the stat plot on. And then under type, you want to make sure you actually have the histogram shaded. And so on my calculator, it's the third one in. If you're working in the TI-84, that one, it's also the third one in. So you just want to make sure you have that highlighted, click enter, and you are ready to graph. Now the second direction, if you look at it, says that we're going to press zoom and then zoom stat. And that's going to be how we get it to pop up on our grid. So if I press zoom, we're going to go to number 9, zoom stat. And now you can actually see our histogram and the bins that are in them. So you can kind of see down below, down right where below the graph where it says plots, you can see where it says N equals 6. That tells us how many items are in that first bin. So I know that, or in whatever bin it is. So right now I have mine highlighted. On your calculator, you do have to hit the trace button first, and that'll make that little cursor kind of appear in the middle top of the bar. So I can see that there's 2 items in that first bin. If I arrow to the right, there's going to be 5 in that one. There's going to be 6 in that one, 6 in the next one, and 1 in the next one. So that just tells us that those are going to be our bins. And we would go back to our graph and we would really sketch that graph. All right, woo. So when I'm looking for, in this particular unit, your graph doesn't have to be super crazy. But if you look at the graph that's in there, I'm just looking for, like I said, a basic sketch. So in my first one, it looks like there's, let's see, there's 2 in the first one, then there's 2, 5, 6, 6, 1. Oops, sorry guys. So in mine, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my first bin is going to have 2 in it. My next one is going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 5, 6, 6, and 1. And there is our graph. 2. If you want to put these numbers at the top, go for it. If you have the little ticks off to the side, that also satisfies this. Okay. But that would be our histogram. Now for the rest of this, we're going to be talking about the shape, center, and spread. So if you guys look back up right here, we kind of skipped over this, but these are when we ask what is the shape of the graph, basically what we're asking for is our graph skewed or not skewed? So we have 2 different kinds of graphs here, the negatively skewed, positively skewed, and then we have the symmetric. Now these, we do have other names for these. Under where it says negatively skewed, we'll always call this skewed left. And kind of same thing for positively skewed, we'll call this skewed right. And those are you're able to use those pretty interchangeably. Same thing with the center one. Symmetric, another name for this is also called normal. It's a normal shape. That just means it's pretty symmetric and even on both sides. So if we're going to look at the shape of this graph, I'm looking at this and it kind of looks for the most part like we're kind of skewed to the left because that's where the tail end of my data is kind of heading. Now we do have this little 1 over here, but there's only 1 item in that bin. And if we actually cut that out, if we were to cut that out, then this graph would be completely skewed left. So if you're that close, if we were talking about what the shape of this graph is, we would say skewed left. Okay. Now, depending on the shape of a specific graph, that's actually how we can tell what the best center shape, what the best center and spread is of any given graph. It's all based on if it's skewed, S-K-E-W-E-D, or if it's normal. Now we have a lot of different centers and spreads, right? For our centers, we have our mean, we have our median, and we have our mode. We do not use the mode. That is the least accurate measure of center of a data set. And depending on if your graph is skewed or normal, then that tells us which one of these is going to be better. So if our graph is skewed, we always choose the median. And if our graph is not skewed, this is where we're going to choose the mean. Now, similarly, when we calculate our spread, our three different measures of spread are going to be the range, we have the IQR, and then we have the standard deviation. Now, kind of like we cut out mode for our measure of center, we do the same thing for our spread. Range is actually usually one of the least accurate ways of measuring how spread out your data is. So if your graph is skewed, we always use the IQR. And if we are not skewed, then we use the standard deviation. So now the example below, this is basically just the same example from before. So because our graph before, we said this graph was skewed left. Because our graph is skewed, that tells me that the best measure of center and spread is using that 5-number summary. We would say the best measure of center would be our median, and the best measure of our spread is going to be the IQR. So remember, if you go in your calculator and you want to find your 5-number summary, if you go back into the stat menu and arrow right to the calc menu, the first option that we see in here says 1-var stats. That is going to be what we choose to find our 5-number summary. So if we click enter, and basically the rule of thumb is keep clicking enter until you reach, until you see a list that looks like this. Now in your calculator, it's going to look different than mine because I'm using a calculator app and not the true TI-84. But for you guys, if you press the down arrow once you're into this list, then you'll be able to see your median, which for us on this one, we can tell is going to be 17. So my median on this one is going to be 17 minutes. And then my IQR, that's when we take the Q3 minus the Q1. So if I take our Q3, which is 19.5, and I subtract my Q1, which is 13, that gives me my IQR of 6.5. And that is your best measure of center and spread. If our graph had been normally shaped, that just means that up here, if this graph was normal, then we would instead have used the mean, which, just so you guys are aware, in the calculator, that has the X with the little bar over it. And in that menu that we were just in, the standard deviation is the one with the sigma, which is just a little O with a tail. Okay. So guys, that's kind of it for today. If you want to give example 3 a shot, we will be trying this in class. But other than that, you can move on and you can start working on your homework for the day.